Hello! Welcome back to 428 Shibuya Scramble. I am recording this like 3 hours before this video is supposed to come up. So, whole fucking boy, I fell asleep last night when I was supposed to record a bunch of videos and shit. Guess what didn't happen? And now we're here. It is... fucking 10 minutes from now, the Dragon Quest video is going to come up. So, fuck me, I guess. But yeah, last time we finished up Minorikawa's story. He got like an actual ending. I decided to keep it at the bad ending, though, that I found post that, to see if it changes anything in Kano's story and gets him a bad ending. So that's where we're at so far. So we got Kuze's orders. Kano's cell phone rang. He saw Kuze's name on the display. Kano speaking. What the hell are you doing? The director's voice was shrill with irritation. What's the situation with Maria Osawa? I have her in custody, sir. We need to get her into quarantine immediately. I'll send a counter NBC terrorism unit to pick her up. A public safety mobile investigation unit belonging to the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department Public Security Bureau. The acronym NBC refers to nuclear, biological, and chemical threats. The unit not only gathers information and investigates terror incidents and makes use of these means, but also deploys relief and safety restoration measures. What's your location? Sir, the situation's a little complicated at the moment, Kano replied. He and Stanley made eye contact. Kano gave him a knowing nod. He knew what he needed to do here. He briefly informed Kuze of the plan to take Maria to the laboratory, but was careful not to mention Alphard. Please, sir, Kano said, bowing reflexively to the phone. Let me handle this. Absolutely not, Kuze exclaimed. There's no way I can allow that. Maria Osawa needs to go in quarantine right now. The act of placing infectees in isolation, such as in a medical treatment facility, in order to prevent the spread of infection for viruses capable of airborne transmission and airborne infection isolation room air, is sometimes used, which employs negative air pressure to ensure that air from within the room does not leak outside. Sir, please, just give us a little more time. Giving her the antiviral is the only way we can save her. If we put her in quarantine, it will be a death sentence. Kuze let out a growl of frustration. Kano, that isn't your decision to make. Kano had run out of arguments. It was clear that Kuze's only concern was stopping the spread of the virus. Director Kuze, are you just going to let Maria Osawa die? We can't put the lives of everyone in Shibuya at risk in order to save a single person. I know that, sir. That's why I'm asking you to please let me go to the laboratory. And if it looks like we're not going to be able to hack the password, then at that point a quarantine can... Kano! Kuze snapped. I'm giving you an order. And I'm not accepting that order. Listen, Kuze said. How many years have you been a cop? What do you mean by that, sir? Kuze didn't reply. Is this an order from up top? What's going on here, sir? Please, I need some kind of explanation. Stop it, Kuze said. You sound like a child. This is dereliction of duty. Call me a child if you want, but I'm not following an order that I know isn't right. Kano punched the end call button with his thumb. From an objective standpoint, maybe Kuze was right. They needed to think more than just Maria. If the Uwa virus spread through Shibuya, it would be a nightmare of epic proportions. Kano understood that perfectly clear. But still, he looked down at Maria's face as she lay collapsed on the floor. This girl was still alive, and Kano couldn't stand idly by and let a living, breathing person die. Consequences be damned, he wasn't going to be the one to weigh the worth of someone's life. As he stood, still clutching his cell phone, Stanley gently set a hand on his shoulder. You did fine, he said quietly. Alphard is in possession of the Uwa virus. The people of Shibuya are already in danger. He may have already released the virus in the city. If he hasn't, he may do so at any time. Right now, what we can do is get that antiviral and arrest Alphard. You made the right choice here. Thanks, Stanley. I appreciate hearing that. Stanley gave Kano a slap on the back. He was right. At this point, they need to focus on the things that could still be accomplished. So, guys, Achi stepped forward. Who's going to take Hitomi's sister and Kano to the lab? Maria was in no condition to walk, so they were going to have to take a car, which meant they needed a driver. I only have a motorcycle license, Achi said, and I don't know where the lab is anyhow. I should go with Maria alone. Kanan looked over at the others. There's no way of knowing for sure that when she might become contagious. We shouldn't needlessly risk exposing more people to infection. She knelt down to gather Maria in her arms. In that case, I should drive. Kano whirled around at the sound of a new voice behind him. Tateno was standing in the doorway. You! Achi's face was red with rage. I can jump to Achi. Ah! Alright, fine. Here we go. You! Achi snarled. In the doorway stood the man with the cane. Detective Tateno? Tateno. Kano and Daisuke spoke simultaneously. Now at last, Achi had a name for the assassin. It was a name he felt he'd heard somewhere before. You son of a bitch! Achi roared. What the hell are you doing here? Tateno bowed his head profusely. I am truly sorry. You're sorry? Sorry don't cut it, man. Not after what you were trying to do to Hitomi. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I intend to turn myself in to be punished for my crimes. But before I do that, please, let me do what I can to help you. I think you've helped enough. Achi grabbed Tateno by the collar and drew back his fist. Kano moved to stop him, but Tateno held up a hand. No, it's all right. Let him do as he pleases. There was no trace of the menacing expression the man had worn in his previous encounters. Achi scowled but lowered his fist, then released his hold on Tateno's collar. Fine. Hitomi's sister needs help, so we do need a driver right now. Make sure those two get to the lab and back safely. That'll make up for that punch I didn't give you just now. Thank you. I am so sorry. Daisuke stepped forward. No, I'm the one who should be apologizing. I'm the one who got you caught up in this. Daisuke, really didn't grow up to be very good people, did we? No, I guess not. Two men stared bleakly at each other, shoulders slumped. In the end, Tateno said, I guess we were just trying to run away from our pain. Yeah, didn't expect my own son to be the one to teach me that. Achi's turned out to be a fine young man. He is Kotone's boy, after all. Guys! Achi stepped into the middle of their solemn heart-to-heart. You can get sappy all you want later. Dad, once this is all over, we're going to go see Suzune, okay? Sure. Isuke nodded heartily. Hold on, Kano spoke up, turning to Stanley. These two take Maria to the lab, that leaves just us two to apprehend Alphard down at the Scramble. Is that going to be enough? I mean, Alphard's not going to show up without a plan. The more people we have on our side, the better. And I doubt we'll be able to get any help from the police. Good point, Stanley agreed. Hey, Achi said. I'm here too. And I'm going with you. I'll keep Hitomi safe. Oh look, good news, Kano. Now we have 3 people. Stanley let out a sardonic laugh. Kano frowned. Gotcha. I appreciate the offer, but having 3 people instead of 2 won't make much of a difference. When you're not sure of the enemy's exact plan, you really need strength in numbers. If we could set up a dragnet like the task force did this morning, that'd be ideal, but... Come on, detective, Achi said. Don't you have any idea what sort of approach this psycho might take? If I were Alphard, Kano mused, then I suppose my biggest problem would be figuring out how to get away after I'd taken Hitomi's blood. Stanley nodded in agreement. I'm betting he plans to involve the UA virus, he said. If, for instance, he tells us he set up a device somewhere to spread the virus throughout Shibuya, that prevents us from taking action against him. Achi swallowed hard. This guy wanted to unleash a killer virus in Shibuya. If he succeeded, then the town Achi had known and loved all his life would become a graveyard. Of course, that's mere conjecture, Stanley murmured. Quite frankly, even I can only guess what he's going to do. His expression was grim. Strength in numbers, huh? Achi said. So, you're saying we absolutely need people, is that it? Essentially, yes, Stanley replied. But not just anyone in mind. If it's not a group that meshes well, it'll hinder more than help. Kano folded his arms across his chest. He looked perplexed. People who mesh well together, huh? Achi had an idea. S.O.S is correct. I want to see what police does. They could ask the police for backup. Might be a long shot, but it was their only move. He hurriedly suggested that, but Kano just shook his head apologetically. Unfortunately, there's nobody on the force who'll help us. Well, isn't there anything you can do about that? I had hoped that Director Kuze would understand, but Kano hung his head. Were they out of options then? No, there was still one last thing they could try. He knew the gang might see it as a selfish request, though. Susumu would probably be furious with him, but Achi would just have to deal with that. Even if his old pals wouldn't forgive him, if they understood that they'd be helping protect Shibuya, he was sure they'd step up and take action. After all, the whole point of the gang was that it was made up of people who loved their town. Can you give me half an hour? I'm going to try to see if I can rustle up some people. Kano straightened himself up. You think you can do it? Achi nodded assertively. Just wait here for me, okay? He said to Hitomi. She gave him a worried smile. All right, I'll be waiting. It'll be okay. Achi did his best to sound reassuring. I promise I'll bring back some help. He knew where he needed to go, the pool hall in Ura Harajuku. That was his old gang's main hideout. Running at top speed, he could probably make it in about 10 minutes. Alright. Rushing out the door with a battle cry loud enough for Kano and the others to hear from back inside the shop, Achi sped on his way. Traffic on Dogonzaka was at a near standstill. Had there been some sort of major accident? As Achi ran along the roadside, he heard a middle-aged man screaming angrily. "You've got to be kidding me! What do you mean? No trains are stopping at Shibuya?" The guy was red in the face. What the heck is going on? Achi felt compelled to stop and check things out. "Calm down, Dad." The young woman with the man must be his daughter, then. "How am I supposed to do that? You heard what the boy said. We have to get out of Shibuya right away." Whoa! Achi got a look at the young woman's face. She was gorgeous. He had the feeling he'd seen her on TV before or something. She was probably an actress, but he couldn't recall her name. "Well," Achi muttered to himself, "you might be pretty, but you're not Hitomi." Once more, he broke out into a run. There was a whole bunch of people walking in the direction of Route 246. It looked like folks really couldn't use the trains right now. Was this some consequence of Maria being infected with the UA virus? Then I'd better hurry. We're the only people who can fix this. Yeah! With another cry to pump himself up, Achi bolted down the sidewalk counter to the throng. Finally, he arrived at S.O.S.'s hideout. Two young men were standing by the door as lookouts. Achi recognized one of them. It was the kid whose so-called buddies had tried to shake him down earlier that afternoon. They roused themselves as Achi approached. "Hey, I need to see Susumu." "No can do. He's in the middle of something right now." Lookouts made no move to let him through. Achi felt a surge of resentment towards Susumu. If he'd still been with S.O.S, he'd never try to post members on guard duty like they were low-ranking Yakuza thugs. Achi pressed again. "Please, I need to see him. It's important. Just tell him Achi's here. He'll make an exception." At the mention of his name, the two lookouts exchanged glances. "Alright, I'll go ask him." One of the lookouts headed inside, leaving Achi alone with the kid he'd helped out earlier. "Do they always stick you on guard duty?" The boy didn't reply. "Back when I ran S.O.S, we never needed anyone on lookout. We were just a bunch of guys who loved Shibuya, who had fun hanging out with each other. That's all it was, really. It's not Susumu's fault that S.O.S changed," the boy said somewhat fearfully. "Lately it's Kiryu who's been driving things." "Kiryu? Oh yeah, that guy." Achi recalled his earlier run-in with him. The guy was an arrogant bully. "Kiryu's planning to steal Susumu's throne. What for?" The boy took a nervous look at the door before hurriedly continuing. "He's trying to expand S.O.S.'s influence. And he's got a lot of people on his side. Right now, the gang is kind of split into two fractions, Susumu's guys and Kiryu's guys." Finally, Achi understood what was going on. The gang members had all been acting so weird because they were caught up in some kind of internal struggle. Kiryu goes around recruiting new followers by force, and if he doesn't like you, he dishes out punishment. This month alone, he sent 8 people to the hospital. S.O.S is a total mess, man. This plan of mine might not work after all. Achi felt a sinking sense of despair. If S.O.S was ravaged with infighting, it was doubtful they'd heed the dangerous request he had for them. "But even still, I want to be a part of this gang," the boy muttered. Achi peered at him in surprise. "Why? They shake you down for dues, stick you on guard duty? That's not a decent way to treat someone." "I look up to Susumu. He treats me like he would anyone else, even though I'm way down at the bottom. And it's not just me. Susumu always puts the members of his gang before himself. That's why I want to stick with S.O.S. Uh-huh. So that's it, huh? Susumu really had been trying his best. And the members of S.O.S., some of them, at least, admired him for it and stuck by him. Thanks, Achi said. The kid gave him a dubious look. Achi didn't know if Susumu would help him out or not, but he knew it was still worth putting their disagreements aside in order to ask. The door opened and the other lookout returned. Susumu says to come on in. Achi nodded and strode inside. Alright. Gonna go back here because need to get back to Minorikawa's actual end. So that way we can get to this jump. Alright, here we go. Door opened and the other lookout returned. Susumu says to come on in. Achi nodded and strode inside. Scent of alcohol and cigarettes washed over him. Susumu sat on the sofa at the far end of the bar. It was where Achi used to sit back in the day. What do you want? Susumu asked immediately. Achi walked up to him and then got down on his hands and knees. Huh? What are you doing there? The hell is this all about? I need people to bring a guy down. I'm here to ask for your help. The crowd around him flew into an uproar. Peals of mocking laughter rang in Achi's ears. I know I have no right to ask you this, but please, I really need your help. Just some guy, huh? Who? He's an international terrorist trying to get his hands on some wonder drug for a killer virus. If we don't catch him, somebody I know is going to die. That's not all. He might try to unleash the killer virus here in the city. Susumu burst out laughing. This is some kind of joke? You alright in the head there, Achi? The other gang members followed his lead, unleashing another storm of mockery. Laughter continued for quite some time. Achi said nothing. He endured the ridicule and simply stared up at Susumu. As patiently as he could, he waited for Susumu to give the proverbial nod. Finally, the laughter subsided and Susumu crouched down and got in Achi's face. Is that how you go about asking someone a favor? Susumu growled menacingly. If you have a problem with me kowtowing like this, I can apologize some other way. If you have a problem with me kowtowing like this, I can apologize some other way all you want. But don't you care that I just told you Shibuya is in danger? Achi's voice was unwavering. But face it, Susumu. Isn't Shibuya the reason everyone here hangs out with each other? If you're trying to tell me you don't want to keep our town safe, then I won't ask you guys for anything again. I withdraw my request. The two glared at each other's eyes. Then, before Susumu can reply, an odd man stepped in between them. Sounds like you've got an interesting story, he said. Mind letting me hear it too? You again. Didn't you already get your interview? Susumu rolled his eyes. I think Grovels here might be telling the truth. The newcomer's face was all seriousness. Lines up with the information I have. Hey, Grovels, you got a second? My name's not Grovels, Achi growled. It's Achi. I'm Minoru Minorikawa, magazine reporter, and know a bit about the stuff you were saying just now. The killer virus you mentioned is called the Uwa virus. that wonder drug is an antiviral medication, and the person you know who might die is Maria Osawa. Am I right? Achi was almost too shocked for words. How do you know all that? Minoru Kawa ignored him and turned to the S.O.S leader. Susumu, he said, something really is going down in Shibuya. What are you going to do about it, boss? Susumu bit his lip. He looked pretty conflicted. Sounds good to me, someone called out. Let's give him a hand. Achi turned to see where the voice had come from. It was Kiryu. You shut up, Susumu said with a glare. Break out of your rut, old man, Kiryu sneered. Achi is right. Isn't keeping our beloved Shibuya safe what S.O.S does? He slipped an arm around Achi's shoulders. You're okay with that, right, Achi? Me going against Susumu's orders to help you out? Kiryu's lips pulled back in a broad, unsettling grin. But first, we have unfinished business, you and I. I mean, I'm willing to lend you a hand, even though you ditched the gang and all. But first, we've got to settle our score, here and now. You understand, don't you? Yeah, you're right. Kiryu grinned hungrily. It's guillotine time! A bunch of gang members started up in eager clamor at Kiryu's pronouncement. In a matter of moments, Achi was grabbed from all sides and hoisted up onto a pool table. A dozen young men held down his arms and legs, positioning him so his head jutted out past the table's edge. Kiryu brought out a steel pipe nearly a meter long. It was caked liberally with dried blood. Guillotine! 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 I'm not gonna keep doing that. The men of Kiryu's faction pumped their fists in the air, chanting madly. Kiryu licked his lips as if drunk off their cheers. Glancing to one side, Achi saw Minoru Kawa speaking empathetically to Susumu. It looked like the reporter was trying to talk some sense into the S.O.S leader. Man, today is my lucky day. I get to take the head of S.O.S's original head. Achi twisted his neck to peer up at him. Man, what point is there to taking my head right now? Oh, my. You don't get it, do you? See, if I send you to the hospital, everyone in Shibuya is gonna know my name. And once I've got that big-ass sign over my head, I'll be able to unite this town under my banner in one fell swoop. Kiryu's eyes was crazed and bloodshot. And that's all the more reason for you to do as I'm asking. If you want to unite Shibuya, you have to protect it first. But if you think you need to take my head to do that, then go right ahead. Even if these guys were all like Kiryu, this many of them actually showed up at the Scramble, they'd be able to do far more than Achi could hope to by himself. The ultimate goal was to capture Alphard. Achi didn't care how they made that happen. He was just sorry he wouldn't get to see it through, to protect Hitomi to the very end. Okay then, Kiryu brayed. The gloves are coming off. Go on. Do it. Achi braced himself. Just make sure you keep your promise. Kiryu raised the steel pipe above his head, and then before he brought it down, he flicked the tip of his tongue against his mouth like a snake. You dumbass. I didn't promise you nothing. Achi strained in sudden panic, but his limbs were pinned down too forcefully for him to have any hope of avoiding what was to come. But the steel pipe never struck home. Just when it was about to smash into Achi's head, Susumu grabbed hold of it. The hell are you doing? Enough of this crap, Kiryu. Susumu yanked the pipe from Kiryu's grasp and tossed it onto the floor. Kiryu stood frozen in surprise. A vein pulsed angrily in his forehead. You guys too, Susumu added, glaring at the others. Let him go. The toughs holding Achi down cautiously took their hands away. Kiryu let out a red-faced cry of rage. "But we got unfinished business!" Ignoring him, Susumu helped Achi slide off the table. Every man gets to make one request in his life that cannot be denied. You remember saying that? Words stood up some bitter memories within Achi. Yeah, I remember. But you didn't grant my request. No, I guess not. That's why I'm going to heed yours, no questions asked. Susumu held out his right hand. Susumu, you are... That'll make me the better man, finally. Achi reached out and clasped Susumu's hand in his. Yeah, Nachi said, letting his relief show in his face. You're quite the guy. Susumu cracked a tiny grin. It was the sort of smile Achi had seen all the time back when he'd run with S.O.S. Suddenly, Susumu staggered and dropped to the floor, falling too fast even to cry out. Achi had snatched the steel pipe back from the floor, striking Susumu from behind once his head was turned. To hell with this, he howled like a madman. S.O.S. doesn't belong to you guys. Not anymore. I won't allow it. Achi didn't flinch. S.O.S. doesn't belong to anyone, he said. It's not mine, it's not Susumu's, and it's not yours. We're just a bunch of friends, hanging out and having a good time. That's the only reason we got together. Nothing more, nothing less. He turned and looked slowly around the room. Hey, you guys! Do you all get together because someone told you to assemble? Do you get together to follow someone's orders? No, you don't. Of course you don't. The bar fell silent. Achi couldn't see the young men who surrounded him exchanging glances. They could tell his words rang true. Kiryu saw it too, and it only made him more and more agitated. Shut up! Enough with the warm fuzzies! Abruptly, he charged forward, giving the steel pipe a mighty swing. Achi managed to dodge the attack by a mere hair. If it had connected, the blow might as well have knocked his head clean off. He quickly backed away. What's the matter? Kiryu taunted. How come all you do is run? The pipe crashed down onto the bar top. Bottles of beer and liquor smashed and scattered. Come on, what's the matter, Achi? Peter slammed his weapon into the pool table, sending balls scattering across the floor. Some of them collided with Susumu. Ugh. Susumu let out a faint groan. Smirking at the sound, Kiryu stalked toward him. Speaking of unfinished business. With a gleaming grin, Kiryu took aim at Susumu's head, lifting the pipe up high. Stop! Before he could think better of it, Achi was rushing for his fallen friend. You dumbass. Without missing a beat, Kiryu shifted his weight and swung the steel pipe at Achi's temple. Achi responded with a fast high kick with his right leg. The steel pipe connected hard with his shin, but it was Kiryu who was reeling off balance. Kia! Achi pivoted and put all his might into a straight right into Kiryu's jaw. The blow struck home. Kiryu's head snapped back and he crumbled to the floor. There was a momentary hush of indrawn breath. Then the bar erupted in a wild clamor that practically shook the whole building. All eyes were fixed on Achi, marveling at marveling at what they had just seen go down. Sounds like folks were hoping for a little more of a fight. Susumu got to his feet, his left hand clutching his right shoulder. You alright? Achi asked. Mostly. Guess my shoulder took the brunt of the blow. The gang members from Kiryu's faction rushed to their unconscious leader's side. Achi shot them a steely glare, and they gathered up Kiryu and dragged him out of the bar. I didn't go too far here, did I? Achi asked Susumu. Is this gonna cause trouble for you? Nah. I figured Kiryu would eventually pull something like this eventually. It was just a question of when. Right. Sure, he's going to go gather up his own bunch after this. We'll probably wind up butting heads again. Susumu didn't sound especially eager for that fight, but he didn't sound especially afraid of it either. Achi was still worried about a few things, but his friend had clearly grown as a leader. Anyhow, back to that story about you needing some manpower? Will the guys here be enough? There were around 30 gang members still at the bar. Achi looked around at them, looked at each of them in the eye in turn. Some he knew from back in the days, while others were fresh faces. I was born and raised in this town. I'm fond of the friends I've met here, and this has always been a great place to have a good time. And today, right here in this town, I met someone who's very special to me. And I know this doesn't involve the rest of you, but I'm willing to protect her. Achi knew he wasn't doing a great job of getting to the point, but the members of S.O.S. listened quietly. And so, it's like, felt like a grade schooler who didn't know the answer to a difficult question. He fussed with his hair and frowned sheepishly. Okay, so I'm not sure how to really put this, but Shibuya is a special town to me because of getting to meet people like that. And maybe... No, I mean it's like that for you guys too, right? Don't you love Shibuya? So help me help this town. He bowed low and deep. I want to protect this girl who means so much to me. And the city that means so much to me as well. I know my answer. Susumu clapped a hand on Achi's shoulder. Listen up, everyone! S.O.S.'s original founder is back in action! He needs our help, and I, for one, am ready to follow him into battle. What do you say? Susumu's people let out a hearty cheer. Fuck. Been a lot of shouting. When Achi marched back into his home, followed by 30 members of his old gang, Hitomi and Kano were obviously overjoyed to see him. Their happiness raised their own spirits unexpectedly high. He felt a palpable sense of accomplishment. All right, detective, Achi shouted. Let's do this. His resounding cry echoed throughout the workroom, and the gang set out for the scramble. What's the matter? Hitomi asked Achi as they made their way through the busy streets. What's the matter with what? You look pretty pale. He peered good and hard into his face. Do I now? Are you tired or something? I mean, you've kind of been going out all day long after all. Ah, it's nothing. Achi kept his voice nice and bright. Just a little hungry is all. Don't worry about me, or Alphard either, okay? I swear I'll keep you safe, Hitomi. All right. Hitomi gave a tiny nod. Just leave it to me. Alphard's got nothing on this guy. He thumped his chest in a display of bravado, but he could feel the sweat beading on his brow. When they reached the scramble, Achi took his place at the location specified by the battle plan Kano had drawn up. Hitomi was only a few meters away. Whatever happened, he was in a good position to shield her from harm. There were 3 minutes left until the appointed rendezvous. Achi wondered what sort of person was going to show up. Still, he knew he couldn't scan the crowd too much. He needed to act as naturally as possible so Alphard wouldn't be suspicious. He risked a glance over at Hitomi. Maybe now wasn't the time for admiring, but he couldn't help but think of how cute she looked. Some ways, seeing her like that felt similar to when he'd first seen her that morning, very same spot. The difference was that this time, it wasn't just Hitomi's good looks that made him find her so attractive. They might have only spent a few hours together, but in that time he'd learned a lot about her as a person. He knew what was important to her, what her worries were, her wants and desires. And also, he'd learned what a kind-hearted person she was. Achi recalled what had happened back in the workroom. Even though her own life had been in danger all day, Hitomi had shed tears for his father and his sister. She really understood people's grief and suffering. What do I do if I can't protect someone as good as her? Achi muttered under his breath, clutching his right leg. His shin was throbbing wickedly where the pipe had smashed against it. He'd been okay walking so far, but any intense fighting and the leg might just give out. But he couldn't let himself worry about that now. If it come down to it, he'd be a human shield to protect Hitomi if he had to. Achi looked at his watch. Only 1 minute to go before 7 p.m. He glanced again at Hitomi and saw her eyes widen with surprise. Suddenly, he followed her gaze across the plaza. He spotted a tall, white man approaching. Is this going to be a keep out? Yep. Alrighty. We're almost at the end of the block. Alright, so this is... No, that's an odd man. Alright, I think we just need to go to Kano now. Yeah, okay. Alright. Alright. Achi's protests were vehement, but he backed down at last. Tateno would escort Kanan and Maria to the lab. That left 3 to try to apprehend Alphard. Kano, Stanley, and Achi. Having only 3 people was a dicey prospect, though, so Achi took it upon himself to head out and gather some backup. Tateno got the car keys from Daisuke, then helped Kanan pick Maria up off the floor. Kano watched him wearily. There was no trace of the blood-curdling expression the older detective had shown when he was holding Maria at gunpoint. His face was that of a man with responsibility, the Tateno that Kano had always known. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" Hitomi asked Tateno. "You might get infected." "That doesn't matter. Don't worry about me. All I care about now is helping you two if I can." He hesitated, glancing down at the unconscious girl he held. "By the way, have Maria's memories come back?" Hitomi tilted her head. "Her memories? I suspect she took a blow to the head when she was abducted. When I ran into her earlier, she didn't even know her own name." "Well, she seemed like the same sister I've always known when she came in here." "Good. And her memories must have recovered." Kano was shocked to hear that Maria had suffered amnesia, but it explained why she hadn't contacted anyone after she'd been set free. "All right then," Tateno said. "We'll be back." Carrying Maria, he and Kanan headed for the door. "Detective Tateno." Kano called out, then paused, tongue-tied when Tateno stopped. There were so many things Kano wanted to say, but he couldn't find the words for any of them. "Once Maria is safe, I'll turn myself in." Tateno kept his head turned, his back turned. The words were like a dagger in Kano's heart. Once this was all over, Tateno would no longer be a detective, but a criminal. Kano knew there was no alternative, but still the realization hit him hard. "Detective Tateno, Stop your dithering. But never lose sight of what you're supposed to protect. Ever." Kano snapped back to attention at Tateno's words. That was Dick Dictum number 1, the advice that kicked off the whole Dick diary. I'm not the one you should be worried about right now, Tateno continued. We need to save Maria Osawa's life and protect the people of Shibuya. Kano bit his lip. Yes, you're right. Kano did his best to quash his emotions. Then we're good. Tateno gave a slight nod, then headed out the door. Detective Tateno! Just before the older men disappeared, Kano gave him a silent salute. It was a breach of protocol to salute while in plain cloths and without his cap. Still, it was the best way he had to let Tateno know how he felt. I'll leave the rest to you. Tateno took one last look over his shoulder before finally leaving the workroom. What? What the fuck? Even after Tateno disappeared from view, Kano remained for a long time at attention, his fingertips pressed to his temple. He squeezed his eyes shut, but still the tears he'd been holding back poured down his cheeks. What the fuck? There was only 30 minutes remaining until the time when Alphard had told them Hitomi would be at the Scramble. They needed to get ready for action. Is the surveillance camera system still up? Kano asked. Yes, Daisuke replied. It looks like what happened earlier was just a temporary hacking job. Then will you help us? Daisuke inclined his head. What do you mean? I'd like you to keep an eye on the Scramble for us. If anyone suspicious tries to get near Hitomi, let us know. Anyone suspicious? How will I know what's suspicious? Like the organ trafficker who suggested you kidnap Hitomi Mr. Endo. It's possible that he might be Alphard. Would you be able to recognize his face? Daisuke furrowed his brow deeply as he began entering commands on his keyboard. Yeah, don't think I could ever forget. It's because of him that He left the rest unsaid. A moment later, several of the monitors switched back to feeds from around the Scramble. Alright, Daisuke squinted at the images. I'm not sure how much help I can be, but let me at least try to atone for what I've done. Of course. And thank you. Daisuke's fingers flew all over the keyboard, and soon all of the monitors were focused on the Scramble and its surroundings. Then he carefully adjusted the angle and zoom for each of the cameras. Now the whole area was under total surveillance. All they had to do was get their stakeout crew to the scene. Where did Achi go? Kano asked Hitomi. I'm not totally sure, but I think he went to find some of his old friends. Hitomi sounded worried. Friends? Achi used to belong to a gang called S.O.S. And actually, he told me that he was the one who formed the gang in the first place. What? Kano couldn't keep the shock from his voice. Achi was the founder of S.O.S. How bizarre that the two of them would wind up meeting each other this way. But I guess there was a big falling out between them, so I think he went to try and win them back over. Kano hadn't heard anything good about S.O.S. since Achi had left them. If things had ended up on bad terms between him and the gang, getting them to help might well be a lost cause. Even if Achi was able to gather some people up, how much would Kano and the others be able to trust them? It'll be alright, Hitomi said, as if sensing Kano's thoughts. I'm sure Achi will bring back some of his old friends. And when he does bring them, I'm sure he'll choose people we can count on. You really trust him, don't you? Yes, Hitomi said without hesitation, and a blush came to her cheeks. Alright, then I'll trust him too. It would take about 10 minutes to get from Endo Electronics to the Scramble. Kano turned to Stanley. Let's plan to head out by 6:50. Stanley gave no reply. He had withdrawn to the edge of the room where he stood lost in thought, his expression uneasy. Kano decided to leave him alone for a bit. Taking a sheet of paper from one of the desks, he began drafting a plan for positioning Achi's reinforcements around the scramble. Look. Damn it. Alright. Here we go. In about 5 minutes, he had drawn up a little map of the optimal places to deploy the team. It included positions for as much as 20 people Achi might bring back. Kano turned around, surprised to find Stanley right behind him all of a sudden. The American looked haggard. Something the matter? Kano asked. You need to go to the Scramble without me. What? What's this coming from all of a sudden? Please don't ask me to explain. Something else has come up and I have to see to it. Sweat beaded on Stanley's brow. Whatever had happened, Kano had no doubt it was something major. And almost certainly it had something to do with Alphard. Stanley, Kano said. Please tell me, we're past the point of keeping secrets. They'd come this far together. Surely it was too late to get all tight-lipped now. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you more. Stanley dropped his eyes. Kano had a vague idea of what Stanley was up to. He felt he needed to keep things hidden even from his own allies, in order to help keep Alphard in the dark. Or at least that was Kano's guess. Alright, I understand, Kano said with resignation. Do what you have to, and come back soon. With an apologetic look on his face, Stanley turned and hurried from the workroom. Kano glanced at his watch. It was coming up to 6:50. Pretty soon they'd have to head for the Scramble, but Achi still hadn't returned. Need to head out soon, he said to Hitomi. He said 6:50, she replied. There's still 2 more minutes to go. Kano let out a tiny sigh. He shared Hitomi's fervent hope that the reinforcements would come, but not her confidence. If Achi didn't reappear, Kano would be left to protect Hitomi all by himself, and to try to apprehend Alphard as well. Would he be able to pull it off as off if it came to that? No, he'd never be able to do it on his own. He decided to wait for Achi, accepting that they'd be late. The clock kept up its steady ticking. With each minuscule movement of the second hand, Kano felt the tightness growing in his chest. A minute passed. 2 minutes. Time was of the essence. They couldn't keep waiting any longer. Tomi, I don't like having to do this, but we can't wait any longer. Seeing the look of determination on Kano's face, she gave him a tiny reluctant nod. Alright. Well, hang on, actually. Nah. I won't do that just yet. I'm so far up now. I'm wondering, should I jump to Tateno, or should I jump back to Kano to see how this goes? I'm gonna jump back to Kano. Fuck it. Let's see how this goes. I don't like having to do this, but we can't wait any longer. Seeing the look of determination on Kano's face, she gave a tiny reluctant nod. Her shoulders began to tremble. It told me. It'll be alright. It'll be alright. I'm just a little nervous, that's all. She had the right to be nervous. Alphard was after the antiviral she had in her bloodstream. Once he had it, Hitomi would become a liability, and he'd want to dispose of. Right now, the only person who could keep her safe was Kano. He clenched his jaw tight and tried to look confident. Please, just try to relax. I'll protect you with my life if I have to. Protecting Hitomi is my job.
Achi, you're back!
I said I'd see you through the very end, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Hitomi gazed back at Achi with grateful reassurance. Kano cleared his throat softly, but Achi and Hitomi continued to stare earnestly at one another. Eventually, the tough-looking young man standing behind Achi spoke up. I've got 30. Will that be enough? Yeah, Kano nodded. That'll be fine. More importantly, have you heard what we'll be doing yet? Catch the bad guy, keep Shibuya safe. Same old thing we always do. The guy flashed a grin. Got it, Kano said. We'll be counting on you then. The 30-odd people at their disposal, they'd be able to encircle the meeting area no problem. The preparations were all set. It was time to confront Alphard at last. All right, detective, Achi shouted. Let's do this. Kano gave a firm nod. Nine minutes later, 6:59 p.m., Kano and the others were in position around the scramble. Each subtle tick of the second hand was like a sharp prod to Kano's nerves. His whole body was stiff with tension. They could not let themselves fail. There was too much at stake. Here, now, hundreds of thousands of lives were on the line. With Shibuya on lockdown, the area around the scramble had been seized by panic, and there had been multiple traffic collisions. Sidewalks were crowded with scared people, overturned cars, and abandoned motorcycles clogged the streets. Amidst the chaos, emergency vehicles sped by at furious speeds. But the fire and emergency personnel and even the police were short-handed, and the whole of Shibuya had begun to look like a war zone. The main roads had been blocked to normal traffic, and the trains weren't stopping at the stations. In effect, the city was in a state of complete shutdown. Kano glanced again at his wristwatch. 6:59 p.m. and 10 seconds. 11 seconds, 12 seconds, 13 seconds, 14 seconds. He scarcely remembered to breathe. Hitomi stood in front of the statue of Hachiko. She wasn't carrying an attaché case this time, but the moment was otherwise the strange mirror of the stakeout at 10 o'clock that morning. She looked terrified. Kano couldn't blame her. The criminals weren't after some case full of money this time. This time, they were out for blood. Her blood. Kano did a slow scan of the area. Achi was standing not too far away. His companions were strewn about here and there, carrying on as normal. Here in Shibuya, those guys fit right in with the crowd, and they had the area around Hitomi completely surrounded. Yet again, Kano looked at his watch. 6:59 p.m., 35 seconds, 36 seconds, 37 seconds, 38 seconds, 39 seconds. He forced himself to take several deep breaths. He focused on the sound of his own heartbeat and exhaled until all the breath was expelled from his lungs. And then it all started. Kano's cell phone rang. I've got him. It was Daisuke, the organ trafficker who devised the kidnapping. It's him! Where is he? Kano asked. Is he close by? I've got him on camera now. He's on the other side of the intersection. Kano looked out across the scramble. There were so many people that it was hard to tell who was or wasn't suspicious. Can you describe him for me? The tall foreign guy, the one wearing glasses. A tall foreigner. Kano's eyes drifted over the crowd. Oh my goodness. Aha. There he was. As they got a closer look, Kano's eyes went wide. This man was someone he'd met before. It was the professor. Leland Palmer, the lecturer from the English department at Hitomi and Maria's school. Is he Alphard? Palmer was walking right toward Hitomi. Hitomi didn't seem to have noticed him yet. When Kano glanced back at his wristwatch, it was 7 p.m. on the dot. When Hitomi realized Palmer was approaching her, she was too stunned to react. He walked directly up to her, the corners of his mouth curling up into a smile. "Hello, Hitomi," he said in English. "How are you doing?" "Professor Palmer? What are you doing here?" Hitomi's voice came out in an anxious squeak. "Why, I'm here to take your blood, of course." This time he spoke Japanese, and with an easy fluency totally different from his usual manner of speech. "I'm the one who injected you with the UA virus." I'd been waiting so long for the opportunity to arise, but it's been quite agonizing, you know. Spending 6 months or more pretending to be a mild-mannered English lecturer. "Professor? You're Alphard, aren't you?" "Let's get down to business, shall we? Neither of us have much time." Hitomi stiffened. "Please, tell me the laboratory password." "After I have your blood. This will only take a few seconds. I've got a device here that will make the extraction quite simple." "No way. The password first." "That would violate the terms we already negotiated." Hitomi and Palmer glared at one another. "All right," Hitomi said at last. "Why don't you negotiate with Kanan instead?" "Kanan?" Hitomi took her cell phone out and dialed. But the phone rang repeatedly, and Kanan did not pick up. "What's going on?" Hitomi's face went pale. "Come on, Kanan." Kano, standing near enough to overhear their conversation, grew increasingly anxious as he watched the pair stare at the phone. What was the right move here? Should he keep waiting? He had to hope talking with Kanan would work out. Kano waited for the call to go through. But Kanan never answered. Had something happened to her and Tateno? Kano felt his heart pounding. "Now then, shall I take what I came here for?" Palmer took a step closer to Hitomi. Kano reacted instinctively. "Freeze!" He drew his gun and trained it on the criminal. Nearby pedestrians scattered in fear. Seizing the opportunity, Achi darted in to protect Hitomi. Palmer let out a tiny sigh. "So you're breaking the terms we agreed upon, then?" "I don't negotiate with terrorists." Kano inched his way closer, his point of aim never wavering. "Hitomi!" he shouted. "Call Kanan again!" Again, Hitomi dialed her cell phone. Palmer opened the attaché case he was carrying. "One more move and I shoot!" Kano shouted. But the terrorists ignored the warning, producing a set of small glass vials from within the case. "If you want to shoot me, then shoot me," he said. "Assuming you don't mind this getting scattered about. Is that... Surely you don't need me to explain." Stanley was right. Alphard had weaponized the virus. Doing his best to conceal his horror, Kano tried to sound defiant. "How can I even know that's real?" It was entirely possible this was all a bluff. "Ah, indeed, these could all be fake. Would you care to test that theory?" Palmer flashed a coy smile, holding out his fist full of vials. He began to tilt them slowly back and forth, letting them clink against each other. They were fake. No, maybe they were real. Kano couldn't quite decide, and he couldn't take any rash actions if there was even the possibility that they were real. Did you come here to carry out a suicide attack, Mr. Alphard? Hardly. I have no desire to die here. All I want is to get a little of this girl's blood and then quietly go on my way. But that all depends on you, doesn't it? His face was overflowing with confidence. Kano couldn't shake the feeling that something was off here. Something about this man's demeanor hinted at something. Well then, what will it be, Palmer? Will you condemn the people of Shibuya to death? Cursing inwardly, Kano lowered his gun. Palmer flashed a triumphant grin, then resumed his stroll toward Hitomi. She stood frozen on the spot. Susumu! A shout had come from Achi. In an instant, a dozen members of S.O.S headed toward Palmer from all sides. Tough luck, pal, Susumu said. Turns out we're not actually innocent bystanders. Now it was his turn to grin. You're completely surrounded. Give up and tell us the password now. And just for the record, we ain't scared of no virus. Tough-looking young men radiated bravado. Without hesitation, they closed in around the kidnapper. Surrounded? You certainly don't look like police. Palmer cast a bemused glance around himself. You're right about that, Achi said. I mean, just take a look. You got a bunch of people who love Shibuya more than their own lives in order to take your ass down. He kept Hitomi shielded behind him while he spoke. There's no escape, he declared. You've lost. Lost? Me? Well, it sure doesn't look like you're gonna get away. Palmer grimaced at Achi's words. I see. Then it appears our negotiations are at a close. Enough of the high and mighty act. Susumu stomped aggressively toward Palmer. Hey, Kano snapped. Easy now. They couldn't risk a scuffle, sending the virus crashing to the ground. What a shame. Palmer swung his right arm up high. Everyone watched in dismay as his hand shot up. The virals he'd been holding sailed upward against the backdrop of the evening sky. Look out! Achi shouted. Catch him! Catch him! A tremendous blast blew Kano off of his feet. As he crashed to the pavement, searing pain shot through his entire body. He knew at once that a bomb had gone off. But why? It didn't make any sense. Alphard had no intention of carrying out a suicidal terror attack. Kano was certain of that. If that had been his intent, he could have just done so at any time, without going through the trouble of putting on this whole charade. Was there some reason that this guy would blow himself up under these circumstances at this specific moment? As he lay dying, Kano had a thought. Could it be... Had Stanley not come to the Scramble because he knew this was going to happen? I fucking knew Stanley would become a thing. Oh, fuck. But Stanley's locked behind something. That end... A mysterious explosion. There's a point for Achi. Alright, hang on. Hey, did you know this was for bad endings? Like 63. 64. So this is the first bad ending that he can get. Mysterious explosion. No hints after 6 o'clock. Alright, let's see how Achi fucking dies. Because this has to be a bad ending for Achi as well. No way it's not. Was this guy Alphard? The man arrived in front of Hitomi and began speaking to her. Hitomi, Maria, even Achi's father, this must be the guy who was responsible for everything. Achi felt a pressing urge to flatten him right then and there. Still, he knew he couldn't blow his cover until Kano gave the signal. Suppressing his raw emotions, he readied himself for action. I have to set aside my hatred. Right now I need to just focus on catching this guy. Why hasn't it happened yet? Why hasn't Kano given the signal? Freeze! Suddenly Kano rushed forward, his gun drawn. Ignoring the pain in his leg, Achi dashed for Hitomi as fast as he could. He cut in between Kano and Alphard, quickly putting Hitomi out of danger. Hitomi! Kano shouted. Call Kano again! Shielded by Achi now, she brought up her cell phone and dialed the number. Some time passed and there was no answer. Had there been some kind of trouble on Kano's end? Looking increasingly worried, Hitomi tried several more times. Then Alphard drew some strange vials from the attaché case he brought. Kano's face wavered with alarm. This had to be the terrorist's trump card then. Kano and Alphard were having some sort of debate. Achi couldn't hear the specifics, but tensions were clearly running high. Kano hesitantly lowered his gun. Alphard flashed a haughty, confident grin. Looks like it's time for our trump card. Susumu! Achi shouted at the top of his lungs. At its signal, the gang emerged from the crowd. Moved en masse to hem Alphard in. Surrounded? Now the terrorist was visibly at a loss. You certainly don't look like police. You're right about that, Achi said. I mean, just take a look. I gathered up a bunch of people who love Shibuya more than their own lives in order to take your ass down. As he spoke, he made sure to keep Hitomi shielded behind him. The pain in his leg was getting worse and worse, but he tried his utmost to not let it show. There's no escape, he declared. You've lost! Lost? Me? Well, it sure doesn't look like you're gonna get away. Alphard grimaced at Achi's words. I see. Then it appears our negotiations are at a close. Why did he still seem so confident? Something definitely didn't feel right. This is just a bluff. He knows he can't get away. His only chance would be to try to spread the virus around and then take off while everyone was distracted. Which meant that he needed to just grab the guy and be done with it. Enough of the high and mighty act, Susumu shouted. Evidently, he shared Achi's opinion. He began to stomp toward Alphard, but he didn't reach him in time. The vials in Alphard's hand went sailing high into the air. Look out! Catch him! Catch him! Achi gestured for his comrades to fan out across the open space. Then, out of nowhere, a huge explosion blew Achi clean off his feet. And his feet clean off. His eardrums ruptured and his world was engulfed in eerie silence, as if time had stopped. As he laid crumpled on the pavement, the one thing that still rang in his ears was the tinkling of glass as countless vials smashed on the concrete. A mysterious explosion. So endings 66 through 71 are all Kanos, probably. Showdown, Showdown. Yep. So my only choice is head on over to Tateno's story. But that will be for another time. Thank you all for watching, especially if you got this far. Stick around, because there's a lot more to come.